My name is Nora Callahan. I am 31 years old and I work the night shift at Mercy General Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I have been a registered nurse for 6 years. I have held the hands of strangers while they died. I have stayed past the end of my shift because no one else was going to. I have eaten cold vending machine sandwiches in stairwells and called it dinner. I am not glamorous. I know that. Last April I attended my stepsister Petra's wedding at the Grandview Estate in Dublin, Ohio. A venue that rents for $18,000 a night and smells like white roses and the particular kind of money that wants you to know about itself. I wore a navy dress I bought off a clearance rack at Macy's for $47. My hair was down. My shoes were sensible. I was not trying to make a statement. I was just trying to get through the evening. I did not expect what happened next. Petra found me near the appetizer table about 40 minutes into the cocktail hour. She was wearing $4,200 worth of alterations on a dress she'd had custom-made in Milan, and she moved through the room the way she always did, like the air owed her something. She had a champagne flute in one hand and her new mother-in-law, Diane, on her other arm, and she was steering toward me with the particular expression I had learned to recognize over 20 years. Warm on the surface. Something else underneath. Nora. She said my name like a hostess announcing a minor inconvenience. I was just looking for you. She turned to Diane and the small cluster of guests nearby, maybe 8 people all in gowns and dinner jackets, and gestured at me the way you gesture at something you're about to explain away. This is my stepsister. She couldn't make the rehearsal dinner, she had a shift. A small practice pause. She's just a nurse. Mercy General. You know, bedpans, night shifts, that whole world. Light laughter from somewhere to my left. We're very proud of her, of course. That of course was doing a lot of work. I smiled. I said, congratulations, Petra. The venue is beautiful. She patted my arm once, like you'd pat a child who'd said something slightly embarrassing and moved on. I stood there holding a water glass. Around me the party continued. A string quartet played something I didn't recognize. Someone nearby was discussing the real estate market in Scottsdale. I did not cry. I did not leave. I took one slow breath through my nose. Roses, candle wax, the faint vinegar bite of good champagne, and I stayed exactly where I was. I should tell you where I come from so you understand what that moment cost me. My mother, Sandra, remarried when I was 9. Her new husband was Gerald Voss, a regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, decent income, wide smile, and 2 daughters from his first marriage. Petra, who was 11, and Camille, who was 7. Sandra had me. That was the whole inventory. From the outside we probably looked fine. 4-bedroom house in Worthington. A pool we used maybe 3 times a year. Christmas cards where everyone wore the same color. From the inside the math was different. Gerald had what I came to think of as the benefactor's arithmetic. The quiet, unspoken belief that his money made him the center of moral gravity in the house, and that everything orbited accordingly. His daughters got the larger bedrooms. His daughters got the new school clothes. His daughters had their extracurriculars paid for without question. Dance, lacrosse, a summer abroad for Petra at 16 that cost $6,400 and was described, without irony, as an investment in her future. I got what was left over. When I was 12, I found a college savings account my biological father had opened for me before he died. It had $3,800 in it. I found the paperwork in a shoebox in my mother's closet while I was looking for a scissors. I asked her about it at dinner. Gerald looked up from his plate. That money went to household expenses, my mother said. She didn't meet my eyes. We were having a difficult year. I never saw that account again. When I was 16, I wanted to take a CNA certification course, a certified nursing assistant program that ran on Saturday mornings at Columbus State. It cost $290. I asked Gerald if we could discuss it. Nursing. He said the word the same way Petra would say it 23 years later, with that same barely visible curl of distance. I suppose that's practical. For some people. He didn't pay for it. My mother didn't bring it up again. I babysat 4 families' children for 3 months and paid for it myself. Petra got a new laptop that year. Camille got a horse. Not a riding lesson. A horse. His name was Brigadier and he cost $14,000, and Gerald talked about that horse with more warmth than he ever spoke about me. I do not tell you this to make you feel sorry for me. I tell you this because you need to understand what I was carrying into that wedding reception. 22 years of being told in 100 different quiet ways that I was useful but not valuable, that I was practical but not impressive, that I was the kind of person who got what was left over. I became a nurse because I wanted to be in rooms where what you could do mattered more than what you could afford, where showing up at 3 a.m. meant something, where competence was its own credential. I was good at it. Very good. I just never told anyone outside the hospital. I had gotten through the ceremony. I was getting through the cocktail hour. The plan was to eat dinner, toast my stepsister's happiness, which I genuinely wished for her for whatever that's worth, and drive back to my apartment on the north side of Columbus by 10. That was the plan. Dinner was served at 6:30. I was seated at table 11, the outermost ring of the room near the service corridor. I was between a distant cousin of Gerald's named Marcus, who sold insurance and wanted to talk about it, and an empty chair where someone had apparently declined to attend. The head table was lit with candles and arrangements of white peonies. Petra sat at the center, radiant, laughing at something her new husband Elliot said into her ear. Elliot Marsh was 34, a commercial real estate developer from Cincinnati, good-looking in the specific way of men who have never had to try very hard. His parents, Richard and Diane Marsh, sat 2 seats to his left. Richard Marsh was maybe 65. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered, quiet. He had spent most of the cocktail hour standing to the side of the room with a glass of water, not wine, listening more than he talked. I had noticed him the way I notice people who don't take up unnecessary space. He had the particular stillness of someone who has been through something. I didn't know his name yet. I just noticed him. Dinner passed. Toasts were made. Petra's maid of honor, a woman named Britt who worked in marketing, gave a speech that used the phrase her whole journey 4 times. Gerald stood and talked about Petra for 6 minutes without mentioning me by name once. I ate my salmon. I drank half a glass of Cabernet. I watched the candles. Then the open floor portion of the evening began. That slightly unstructured hour between dinner and dancing when people circulate and the bar does its best work. And Petra found me again. She brought 3 people with her this time. Britt. A woman named Cassandra who did something in finance. And Elliot's younger sister, Vivian, who had spent dinner talking loudly about her apartment in the West Village. Nora. Petra's voice carried. It was designed to come meet everyone properly. She put her hand on my shoulder and turned me to face the group. Then with a smile I had been watching her perfect since she was 11 years old, she said, "This is my stepsister. She works nights at a hospital downtown. We used to joke that she'd rather spend her evenings with 6 strangers than come to family dinners." Soft laughter. I told her not to come tonight. I said she'd be exhausted, but she insisted. You know how it is. Vivian smiled politely. Cassandra made a small sympathetic noise. Britt said, "Oh, that's so sweet that you came anyway." I said, "Congratulations again, Petra." I did not explain myself. I did not list my credentials. I did not tell them about the 12-hour shifts or the charge nurse commendation I received last January or the patient I coded for 47 minutes in November and brought back. I just smiled. And somewhere to my right, a chair scraped back from a table. Richard Marsh had stood up. He was looking at me. Not the polite, glancing way people look at someone across a room. He was looking at me the way people look when they are trying to place something, when a face is pulling at a memory they can't quite reach. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was quiet, but the kind of quiet that has weight. The conversation around us slowed. He walked toward our group. Diane had noticed now too, and she was watching him with an expression I couldn't read. He stopped about 3 feet away from me. He looked at my face for a long moment. "Have we met before?" he said. "I don't think so," I said carefully. "I'm Nora Callahan. I work at Mercy General." Something moved across his face. "Mercy General," he repeated. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Behind us, the string quartet had started something slow. Nearby conversations had tapered off. People were noticing. "The ICU," he said. I felt something go still inside me. "I rotate," I said. "I've worked the ICU." He looked at me for another long second. Then he turned to the room, not just our small group but the whole room, the 30 or 40 people who were within earshot, and he said in a clear, carrying voice, "I need everyone to hear this." February of last year. I had been covering a double shift in the cardiac ICU, 14 hours because the night charge nurse had called out sick and there was no one else. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the cafeteria does its worst on Tuesdays, and I had eaten a granola bar and 3 cups of bad coffee, and I was running on the specific kind of exhausted that stops feeling like tiredness and starts feeling like a different temperature. At 2:17 a.m., a patient was brought in from the ER. Cardiac event. 64-year-old male, no prior history on file, brought in by his adult son who had found him unresponsive in a hotel bathroom in downtown Columbus. The attending got him stabilized. I was assigned to his overnight monitoring. He was in and out of consciousness for the first 2 hours. Disoriented. Frightened, in the way that people who are usually in control become frightened when they realize they aren't. Around 4 a.m. his vitals shifted in a way that the monitor would not have flagged for another 8 minutes, but that I caught. A particular pattern I had seen 3 times before in 6 years, the kind of thing that lives in your hands before it reaches your brain. I called the attending. I was insistent in the way I had learned to be insistent, which is calmly and without apology. The attending came. The intervention happened. The cardiologist told me the next morning that without that call, the patient would not have survived to breakfast. I went home. I slept for 5 hours. I came back for my next shift. I never told anyone. It was my job. The patient's name was Richard Marsh. He told the room everything. He told them about the hotel. About his son Daniel calling 911. About waking up in the ICU and not knowing where he was. About a nurse who sat with him for 20 minutes at 5 a.m. when the fear got bad. Not because it was in her job description, just because she stayed. About the attending who told him afterward that the nurse had caught something the monitors hadn't. She saved my life, he said. He said it simply, without theater, which made it land harder than theater would have. I never knew her last name. I tried to find out. The hospital has privacy policies, which I understand. I just wanted to. He stopped. He looked at me. I just wanted to say thank you. The room was very quiet. Petra was standing 4 feet to my left. I did not look at her. But I was aware of her the way you are aware of a sound that has suddenly stopped. I was just doing my job, I said. No, Richard said. You were doing something beyond your job. At 4 in the morning. After a double shift. That is not nothing. That is. He paused and something in his face shifted, something that had nothing to do with performance. That is everything. Diane had come to stand beside her husband. Her hand was on his arm. Her eyes were wet. Elliot was looking at Petra with an expression I could not fully read from where I was standing. Marcus, the insurance cousin, had put down his drink. Someone began to clap. Then someone else. I looked down at my $47 navy dress and the sensible shoes I had worn because I would be on my feet for hours, and I thought about the granola bar and the bad coffee and the 4 a.m. vitals that no monitor had caught, and I thought, quiet truth. Finally seen. The shift in the room was not dramatic. It did not happen all at once. It moved the way temperature moves, gradually until you realize the air is different. Vivian asked me carefully how long I had been a nurse. Cassandra said her mother had been hospitalized last year and she had never thought about what the nurses actually did between the doctor's visits. A man I didn't know shook my hand and said his wife had been a labor and delivery nurse for 30 years and he was glad someone was finally saying it. Britt said nothing. Petra said nothing. I watched her from the corner of my eye. She had found a fixed point across the room, a candle arrangement or a window, and she was looking at it with the expression of someone doing quiet arithmetic and not liking the answer. I did not approach her. I did not need to. Richard found me again near the end of the evening. He asked for my work email. He said he wanted to make a donation to the Mercy General Nursing Staff Fund in my name. I told him I appreciated it, but it wasn't necessary. He said it was necessary to him. I gave him the email. Diane hugged me. She smelled like gardenias and something warm, and she held on for a moment longer than a stranger usually would, and I understood that sometimes a hug is the only language left for certain kinds of relief. By 9 o'clock the dancing had started and the bar had gotten busy and the room had settled back into the ordinary noise of a wedding reception. I finished my glass of water. I said goodnight to Marcus, who had stopped talking about insurance sometime around the revelation and had spent the rest of the evening being quietly respectful in a way I found more touching than he probably intended. I found a server and left my linen napkin folded on the table. I did not find Petra to say goodbye. She was dancing with Elliot and the look on her face was complicated, happy and unsettled at once, the expression of someone recalibrating something they had been certain of. I wished her well genuinely in the privacy of my own chest. Then I walked through the large gilded doors of the Grandview Estate and into the cool April air of the parking lot. I drove north on I-71 with the windows down and the radio off. The night was cold and clear and smelled like cut grass and distant rain, and the highway was nearly empty at that hour, and I drove with both hands on the wheel of my 2019 Honda and I let the wind come in. I did not feel triumphant. That is the honest answer. I felt something quieter than triumph. Something that lives just past the point where you stop needing the acknowledgement and realize it found you anyway. Not because I had arranged for it. Not because I had argued or performed or proved anything. Just because I had shown up at 4 a.m. and paid attention and done the thing I was trained to do, and the truth of that had survived the years between. I thought about my father's $3,800 savings account. I thought about the $290 CNA course I paid for in babysitting money. I thought about every dinner where my name was the one that didn't get said. I thought about Richard Marsh saying that is everything and the room going quiet. I got home at 10:15. I made chamomile tea and sat by the window in my apartment and watched the streetlights and the slow movement of traffic below. The city at that hour is a particular kind of companionable. Keeps going. It doesn't ask you to explain yourself. My phone buzzed once. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Elliot. I'm sorry for how tonight started. Thank you for what you did for my father. I held the phone for a moment. Then I set it down and drank my tea. I was just doing my job. That's what I'd said to the room. But what I know, what 6 years of night shifts and cold coffee and 4 a.m. interventions have taught me, is that just as doing an enormous amount of work in that sentence. That word is carrying everything they couldn't see. The sacrifice. The precision. The choosing to stay. I don't need anyone to see it. But on a cold April night in a parking lot outside a venue that cost $18,000, it was seen. That was enough. That was more than enough. Have you ever been underestimated because of what you do? Tell me your profession in the comments. I read every single one.